lanceur d'alerte Thomas Shaw vient de frapper encore une fois.
Nos agents se font démasquer, des années de travail de renseignement passent à la trappe.
I think, because I'm a big fan of Homeland, I think we're a much bigger cast, so there are multiple storylines to tell and multiple perspectives to tell that story from. I think it's a complicated, messy account of what the CIA is. I think it doesn't have the same level of patriotism. I think it's actually much more critical of itself, of the CIA and of American policy, because it's facing itself in foreign land. So it's always in reflection of the BFV, the German equivalent of the CIA. And they tell each other the truth. They work diametrically opposed to each other. As we move into the second half of the series, which is our second season, they start to work in accord with each other. So I think it gives an account of the CIA, which is possibly not seen very often. It's a murky, messy, complicated affair. All of that. I read a lot of literature. There is a lot of literature out there. People are fascinated with the CIA, obviously. I spoke with a guy called Bob Bayer, who wrote a great book. He was our advisor on the show. I got in the car one day and drove down to Langley, because I thought, oh, maybe I could just pull in and sort of knock on the door and say, hi, can I ask you about being a spy? But when you get down there, you realize the security is quite heavy. So I just driving past and kind of going around the town where he would probably have been raised, I thought, oh, that would be good, go and see that. And then I watched a lot of films, a lot of portrayals of the CIA in contemporary consciousness. So how do audiences understand the CIA to be, and how is it really? And then, of course, I got to Berlin, and it's sort of so rich with information. There's a million museums out there. There's museums about the Stasi, the Second World War. So there were so many places to pull really exciting information from. And then, of course, I read Olin Stenhauer's fictional book. So plenty of reading and watching. I think it is the nature of being a spy, because you do operate alone. You do operate according to your own initiative. As you'll see in the second half of this season, Daniel goes into deep cover, and ultimately what that means is that he doesn't communicate with his institution very often. He checks in occasionally, or he'll have a handler. So, but you're left alone. And one of the things that I was interested in was, in the second half of the series, Daniel is in deep cover with the far right faction, and I wanted to see how far he could be persuaded into that way of thinking, and actually would he change? Would he flip over to a different way of thinking? And it's always possible, And in terms of personal relationships, it's always the most dangerous thing. But I think you'll see it in the relationship between Daniel and Esther Krug, that they overstep a line because, out of necessity for human interaction with another person, that they kind of get into this quite intense relationship, and you never really know if it's true or whether they're playing each other for information. So kind of, yeah, but a lonely existence, I would imagine. I think that is the absolute nucleus of why we all chose to do this series, and it was always a battle to sort of balance a kind of intriguing plot opposed to a personal storyline, which tells exactly that these people are human beings that do have opinions, they do have political opinions, and yet their job requires them to remain impartial, even in extreme circumstances when their instincts tell them one thing and the job description tells them another. And, one of the things that fascinates me is that the nature of the CIA changes according to who is the president of the United States. And therefore, at this very moment in time, the CIA is trying to figure out who they are and how do they operate in this current climate. And And as a television show, it's our job to tell that story without alienating either side. We have to tell a balanced story, but we also have to tell the truth. It raises the question of what is the truth and how much truth do we need to know? Because we feel that as in democratic nations that we have the right to know everything about everything. But in knowing that, we destabilize a political situation. So on a personal level, I am always hunting for the truth, but there is a part of that truth that I think I don't need to know that. If I do know that, then it's already compromised. One of the things I do think, which is an interesting subject, which in the very beginning of season 1, there is a tiny, tiny clue on a USB stick that I sincerely hope is developed into season 3, which is about following money. I feel like when we truly understand the huge bank accounts of the most wealthy people in the world and where that money is being spent, then we'll start to understand how governments are being bought. And I think I'd like to see a season which explores that.
Vous savez pas dans quoi vous vous êtes fourré.
Alors éclairez-moi.
Pourquoi vous me suiviez?
J'aime savoir à qui je dois me mesurer.
Fais bien attention, Daniel.
Attention à quoi?
À Berlin.
Berlin Station, votre nouvelle série thriller, à partir du dimanche 15 avril à 20h55, en exclusivité sur 13e rue.